Hi everybody. So in this video, we will discuss the Anglo-Saxon period, which is the beginning of the English literature. Now, in this video, we will briefly look at the Anglo-Saxon age and its tradition. Second, we will also try to understand what kind of poetry was written in this particular age. And third, if you are preparing for UGC-NET or STET or any exams related to English literature, this video is going to be very helpful to you. And also if you are in post-graduation, undergraduation, so this might help you in your course, in your future, Now, let's see an overview. So the Anglo-Saxon period, also known as the Old English period, refers to the era of English literature and history of the approximately 5th century to the Norman conquest. So from 5th century to 1066 is basically known as the Anglo-Saxon age, and this is the beginning of the history of English literature. Now this period is characterized by the dominance of the Anglo-Saxon, and they were the group of Germanic tribes who migrated to England and started living in England and started calling themselves as Anglo-Saxons. And their influence, their native language was inspired by the Latin. So Latin became the most dominant language in that particular time, in the Anglo-Saxon period. And also the literature produced during this time provide values, or let's say value insights into the culture, society and language. It's obvious that if someone comes from a different land and if they occupy that particular land and starts dominating those fields, those areas or those particular state, then their culture, their society, their language becomes the most dominant ones, right? For example, if we take an example of this postmodern world, then English is the most dominant language because United States and most of the superpower countries, they speak English. This is why we have this dominant language called English. Okay, now moving forward, in the early Anglo-Saxon age, in the early Anglo-Saxon period, the tradition of writing poetry, the tradition of writing drama, it was in oral form. And also the stories, poems and historical accounts were passed down through the generations in the form of oral tradition. And I think this oral tradition actually happens everywhere. It's everywhere, even in India, even in Brazil, even in United Kingdom, even in United States, wherever you are from. So you must be heard, some stories from your grandmother, grandparents, from your father and their fathers. So it's like this oral tradition. We just keep on, we keep on sharing it with our coming generations. Now, the skilled poets and the bards were highly regarded in society for their ability to compose and recite these literary works. So bards are basically poets. So all these poets and bards, they were quite famous in that particular time because they had this power, they had this ability to compose, their literary works, and they had this power to tell their stories, in front of a lot of people. Now, the poetry of this particular age was basically either heroic or elegiac. Now, heroic means this type of poetry celebrates the deeds of the heroic figures, such as the warriors. So we already know that wherever there is a tribe, there is a warriors, because people usually they used to go on war, and whoever the winners or whoever the greatest of them or greatest warrior among them were celebrated, and also there was another kind of poetry which was elegiac poetry. Elegiac poems expressed sorrow and lament. So let's say if someone is dead, then in that particular situation, when their friends or when their loved ones starts writing about them, that particular kind of poetry known as the elegiac poem. So it has a kind of sorrowness, it has a kind of lament kind of, lament kind of feeling. Or also it talks about earth, it talks about, nature, it talks about passing of time, There's a very famous poem called The Country Churchyard. Please do read it. The Country Churchyard. It's a very beautiful poem, and it's also an elegiac poem. Now, religion and Christian influence was one of the most dominant thing in this particular time, because the conversion of the Anglo-Saxon to Christianity primarily through the efforts of missionaries like Augustine of Canterbury had a significant impact on the literature. Also, one more thing you need to remember is that in the initial time, in the initial period, when literature was actually started forming, the religion and the Christianity, influenced a lot, because we see different kinds of, like every time you read any historical context, any historical poetry, any historical or any classical English poem, you will find the traces of religion, you will find the traces of Christianity in it, because entirely, like everything entirely was, let's say everything entirely was inspired by the Bible, or by the religion, or by the Christianity. And also the many traditions, stories and poems were adapted to incorporate Christian themes and values. And these Christian missionaries, they used to help writers to write down, or they used to like influence writers to write about Christianity, about God, and about Holy Grail and everything. And also the biblical stories were also translated into Old English. And this particular time, biblical stories which was written in Hebrew, it was translated into English as well. Anyway, if you want this PDF, then you can join my Telegram channel. I will put the link in the description, and from there you can join it. And also, if you are looking for UGC-NET classes, you can also contact me. I take online UGC-NET classes. Anyway, now the manuscript of Anglo sections were actually collected in a book called Extra. It's a very important book, and all the poems, all the writings, especially that we have in the English literature, is basically collected in the book called Extra. Okay, UGC has already asked this question. They might never ask you this question again, but please do remember, everything that we have in the classical literature basically comes from the Extra book. And now we will look at the language and the evolution of English. So Old English, the language of the Anglo-Saxon period, is quite different from modern English, as we already know. If you read Beowulf, which is again one of the oldest, or let's say the oldest, poem that we have, is called the Beowulf, and it is written in the Old English, in the Anglo-Saxon English. So it's quite difficult to understand. Also, however, it is the foundation of the English language, and it has contributed many words of linguistic elements to the modern form. And this, since it was the evolution, it was the beginning of the English literature, so it had a certain peculiar way of writing, but later on it influenced our modern form, our modern literature, our modern language that we know today. Now and after that we find the Norman conquest and the transition from, especially from Latin to Spanish. The Anglo-Saxon period came to an end with the Norman conquest that happened in 1066, that I have already mentioned in the early section, which was led by the William the Conqueror. Now, in conclusion, we can say the Anglo-Saxon period in English literature is characterized by the epic poetry. So, majority of the poems were written in the epic form. And I have also made a video on epic poetry. Please go and check it out. Basically, epic poetry is a kind of poetry in which there is a character, who is actually very dominant, who is actually very passionate, who is actually very courageous and very loyal, and it discusses the deeds of the courageous man. It discusses the deeds of the loyal servant, of the loyal brave man. Okay. For instance, Rama, if you read the Ramayana, if you read the Mahabharata, you would find that the Ramayana is basically a kind of story of a king who is also a very, he's also a very loyal, he's also a very strong, he's also a very brave man, and it tells the deeds of the Rama. And also elegiac themes were there, and elegies were written in that particular time, and also the strong oral tradition was there, and it was influenced by the Christianity. So all you have to remember is that the initial or the early stage of the English writings were influenced by the Christianity. It was influenced by the Christian tradition. Okay. Now, despite its linguistic challenges, the literature from this period provides valuable insights into the early history, culture, and worldview. As we have already seen, like Germanic tribes came to England, and they started invading England, and soon they captured the most of the part of the England, and they started influencing their language, their culture. So that's all for today. In the next video, we will talk about Anglo-Norman period. So Anglo-Saxon and Anglo-Norman is considered to be the old English literature, and we have already seen the first part of it. So if you find this lecture helpful, please hit the like button and share it with those who need it, and see you in the next one.